Richard, good to see you. How are you?
Hey, Sherrit, thanks for doing this. Good to meet you. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. I think we met last. I think it was in September. Actually, I think you
I
were
think
here and
so
I was
briefly.
here. I think it's time we're gonna do that one time face to face as well. Not like
I
that.
agree.
So welcome again. I mean, you are a veteran with us. So just could you tell us a little bit about your journey, the milestones that created the values and purpose that you hold today?
Boy, that's a huge question, but Sherrit, thank you. And I know with Anti-Racism Live, and I'm so glad that Peace One Day continues to do this. This is so important. And you and Jeremy and the entire team. And when I think about, what brings us to where we're at today, there's so many formative experiences that I don't think we fully realize at the time we're going through them initially. And for me, there's all sorts that I've recently been pulling back in and remixing in my brain to try to understand what does the idea of being different and being other, what does that mean to me? And I do think in my reporting, journalist as an anchor at MSNBC and NBC News for the last 13 years, and then CNN before that for 5 years, is that I'm a different person in understanding and answering that question today than I am, 15 years ago. And I think it has a lot to do with my recent civil rights reporting on some very difficult times in North America, ones that many are familiar with and some are not, but with the rash of reporting and incidents of people of color being beaten or killed on camera has really been something I think shocking to many, including me as a journalist, and having to cover that on the ground or anchoring with breaking news for hours upon hours. I think that has really made me rethink why and how and what's next. And in terms of my personal point of view, my father, who was a pastor, was inspired by another man of color during his time, and that was Martin Luther King. My father was born in the early, 1900s, and the person that he watched stand up as a pastor was Martin Luther King. And so there was one man of color being an influence to another man of color, my father, who then decided, hey, if that guy can do it, I can do it too. And I think that's one of the recent realizations in the last 10 years that I've had, is that the ability for us to help others by just being there, by being different and owning that difference. And so I think what has brought me to my view today is, let's own our differences so that we can find our sameness. And that, I think, is the equation. Not to be afraid of being different, as so many have said, so many great orators and leaders, but we do it so we can find out how we share so much. And, I think over the last 3 years, we've really found that globally, haven't we, Sherrit? That we are very different, but at the end of the day, we are all the same. And I think as we battled not only the issues of racism, but also the issue of COVID, we all were very different in the way we responded, but we were also very similar. And it was a melding moment globally to understand that, these affectations of what we believe to be the problems in our societies became very glaring during COVID. But I think during that time, we also found each other, whether it was in one country, one regionality, one continent, or across continents. It was a melding moment. So what brought me today in I guess the 3 minutes that I was discussing the Sherrit has really been changed recently. And I can dig in deeper early on in some of the experiences I've had personally being attacked, either verbally, being harassed because of the way I look when, I'm much more than the way I look. And you also, being a journalist, you understand this. The first thing people see is this box, right? Immediately, that's the definition of who we are. And in reality, this is just one intersection of what we are. Because when we walk into a room, or in this case, when we walk into a square on your screen, we're really more than what we look like. And we, culturally, I believe, think that way, that the way we look is the majority of what we are. And in reality, we shouldn't let that happen, nor should we do that to other people. And so that's been one of the early experiences that I had as a journalist, that really most folks, when they turned on the TV, would say, hey, look at that Asian man anchoring. That's kind of strange. What's he doing there? And we have to try to move past that. I have had to try to move past that as well, and to realize that the intersections that every individual brings into a room is not just one or two, it's 10, 20, 30 different intersections. And I think when we think of Anti-Racism Live and the conversations that you're having today, Sherette, that has got to be, I hope, one of the takeaways that we all try to act on going forward.
You know, Richard, this is really, you said so many things that I found amazingly important here. But you also said, you said that we need to, in order to move forward, we need to embrace ourselves, who we are, the differences in us, but to remember that we're all the same, and lend a hand to one that are struggling in that. And I was wondering, are there any, I know it's trying to be, to talk about something that is very deep, as you said, in a very short time, but is there anything that you can say to help those people to actually embrace themselves and not be afraid of being different? And how can one approach this?
One of the things I started to do a lot, Sherette, was I would write or tell stories about others that were like me. That would be the first step. So, I was first at CNN. I did a story on Asians that came to America illegally. And the reason why I did that was because my grandparents came to the United States illegally as well. And the reason why they came to the United States illegally is because of a law that said Chinese could not come to the United States. It was the first racist law in U.S. history, and it's so far been the only purely racist law. The law simply said in 1882, if you're Chinese, you can't come to America. We've had other executive orders. We had one in the last administration that picked out specific countries that were Muslim majority, also having similar effects, but it was not a law, it was an executive order. And so I started to tell stories that were about me, so I could kind of understand what I am, as well as to share the story of a million other people like me that had this experience of having family members that came to America from Asia illegally. And so that's the first thing I would suggest, is start to tell stories about yourself, whether it's through social media, if you're a journalist, to write stories, if you're in school, to do projects around that. And then on the flip side is to tell stories about people that are not like you. That are people that you would never think of yourself to be similar to them. And why would you want to write stories and share stories, either through social media or the work you do if you're a journalist, or what you do at work if you're a marketer, for instance, is because by getting to know these other groups that are not like us, we then realize how we are similar and how we can learn to accept others. One of the things I often will say is make a list of 3 people that you would never ever hang out with, that you could never see yourself spending time with. At 3, just stop and think. And then go and have a lunch and go meet with those 3 people. And I think that's the way we're going to start to understand ourselves better, as well as understand other people, and to make it part of a daily habit, to make it part of a muscle set and a muscle tone. And that list of 3 people is very tangible.
Well, we have only 5 minutes, unluckily, but I would like to hear more about what you think about whether media, news and news outlets, if they're doing enough to support the fight against anti-racism and the elimination of anti-racism.
Yeah, you know the answer, Sharet. We can do a lot better. At the moment, for instance, the company I work for is the entire news group is being run by a man of color. His name is Cesar Conde, and he has publicly said that he wants to have 50% in front of camera and behind camera across all of the NBC News group to be underrepresented individuals. That would be workers of color. It'd also be women. Those are some of the groups. LGBTQ plus. Those who are non-binary. He wants 50%, and he said that publicly. And for media companies, you know how our business works here, Sharet. We don't often talk about that. That's a topic that typically, traditionally has been. You don't bring that up because then it shows how you're not doing very well at it. So I think if media companies can self-report what their gaps are and then say openly what their plan is to close gaps, that would be a step towards creating an environment where the stories and the media that we consume is reflective of our communities, of the spaces that we live in. Right now, it is not reflective, and I don't need to, I'm not breaking any news by saying that it's not reflective of our communities, of our societies. But on the media side, if they can do that, again, self-report and lay out the plan as Cesar Conde has done, it's the only network in the United States that's done that this openly and this directly. I think that is one way that we can start to get better.
I think you're absolutely right, Richard, about the fact that the media can act a little bit more on that respect. And you talked about what your media outlets have done, but have you seen any other constructive action that inspired you to fight for justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion in a world free of racism that is not only in the media but around you?
Well, gosh, we're right here. This is one great group without, tooting the horn of Jeremy Gillian and his entire team. This is a great effort, and it's so important for so many years. And then when you look at certain businesses and the business leaders, I had in business education, for instance, that's important that we discuss the inclusion of different types of leaders. And it's not only when it comes, because racism can also be economic, and economics can affect racism, and we're not going to get into all those sort of cross sectors into this in this space. But there have been many educators like C.K. Prahalad over at the University of Michigan who for a long time said there is value at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, bottom of the pyramid economically has often been people of color. And he was, despite being one of the top business strategists in the United States and globally for decades, like he was always ranked at like number 1 through 5 or something like that. His focus at the end of his career, in the last 10 years of his career before he passed, was the bottom of the pyramid. That often included people of color, that often included those that are not being included into the economy. That division of the global north and global south that we have talked about for so many years. His focus was you can find, from a business perspective, value at the bottom of the pyramid. It's a great book if you should read it. I think it's 20 years old now, but it is right on the money.
Richard, I cannot thank you enough for your really inspiring words, and I hope people can take a lot from them because we have a lot to work with. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to see you next time.
We will, Sharet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, Richard. Thank you so much.